Hi friends! Your cholesterol tests might look normal and still miss the real danger. Today, top lipidologists are measuring blood markers your standard labs don't catch. Now, why should you care? Because getting cholesterol wrong may affect how you think and move as you age. Yet even medical experts can't agree on whether high or low is better. Now, some studies link it to sharper brains and stronger legs. Others to heart attacks. And the American Heart Association, they keep changing their minds too, again and again, because they too have been wrong. So here's the truth most people never hear. High Lp(a) is bad. You should have this checked. This is genetic. If you have a normal number, you won't need this repeated. High ApoB is bad. It carries cholesterol and it dramatically changes with your diet. Now, overeating any calories will get you high ApoB levels and being overweight. And specific foods are even worse. High triglycerides are bad. You get high triglycerides from eating a low quality carbohydrate diet or simply being overweight. Now, if you have all three of these elevated, you are at super high risk to have some critical blood vessels blocked. This disease is called atherosclerosis. When was the last time you had all three of these checked? Being young doesn't necessarily protect you, but hopefully it'll buy you some time. Now, the first symptom of atherosclerosis are skin changes, hair loss, especially in the lower limbs. People will notice that, my legs aren't so hairy anymore. Maybe you don't have hair on your toes. Your skin may start looking smooth and shiny. And then you may feel tingling in your toes. That's nerve damage. That's a form of neuropathy. And as you can imagine, over time, this will affect your mobility. These changes take several decades. People oftentimes don't notice the skin changes, but they do notice low back pain and impotence. The end stage of atherosclerosis presents in the 60s with heart attacks, strokes, kidney failures, and lung infections. So if you're on Facebook and your friends are having funerals, you should really think about how to change that for yourself. If you don't want to have these complications and spend the last 12 years of your life sick, then you really need to get those labs checked and understand how cholesterol relates to your overall health. Getting it wrong can mean a loss of health. Higher cholesterol levels mean you will have higher apolipoprotein B levels. So keeping your apolipoprotein low keeps the debris out of your blood vessels. And that's advantageous to keep your blood flow. So how do you keep apolipoprotein B levels low? Well, you need to lower your cholesterol, specifically the LDL cholesterol. However, lowering cholesterol in your diet doesn't really help you lower your apolipoprotein B levels by very much. And the reason is because the biggest organ responsible for your cholesterol levels is your liver. The liver makes cholesterol and removes cholesterol. It helps you keep blood cholesterol in balance. So if you want to lower your apolipoprotein B levels, you need to understand why your body even needs blood cholesterol when every cell in your body can make its own cholesterol. Cholesterol is a type of fat called sterol that is needed to make the bag that holds each and every one of your cells. And cholesterol, of course, you're probably concerned because it makes essential hormones like cortisol, estrogen, testosterone. These all need cholesterol, including your body's ability to make vitamin D. Fortunately, these hormones, even your testosterone level, is not dependent on your total blood cholesterol level. So even if you took medications to lower your blood cholesterol, your testosterone won't be affected. However, you do need that blood cholesterol for bile, which your liver also produces. And you need bile to help you digest fat. Now, this function turns out to be a great way to help you lower cholesterol. And here's how it works. When you eat food, your body will secrete bile to help you digest that food into your intestine. And normally, your body will reabsorb 95% of that bile that you secrete, which is great for your liver because then it doesn't have to do as much work. But if the bile doesn't get recycled, well, that forces your liver to pull in more cholesterol from your blood, which then lowers your apolipoprotein B levels. So the best way to prevent cholesterol recycling is to poop. If you have frequent bowel movements multiple times a day, you can significantly reduce your cholesterol levels. That is, if you can trap the bile. So this means you have to eat more soluble fiber. Soluble fiber are carbohydrates found in grains like whole oats, fruits, and seeds like chia seeds, flax seeds. Hey, doesn't that sound like a pretty good breakfast? Well, when you eat these foods with soluble fiber, your body can't really digest it. So it traps in the bile. And on top of that, when you eat these plants, you also get sterols and stanols that compete with cholesterol absorption. That too reduces how much cholesterol you can resorb from your bile. And this is why people who eat predominantly a whole food plant-based diet, they can significantly drop their blood cholesterol. Now, I mentioned cholesterol doesn't really elevate your blood cholesterol levels. And that's because your body is very inefficient at absorbing dietary cholesterol. Like I said, most of the cholesterol in your bloodstream is made by your liver. And your liver makes cholesterol in response to saturated fat. So if you eat a lot of saturated fat, it's going to make cholesterol. And the simple reason is because you need cholesterol to transport saturated fat. Now, in your blood, there's a molecule called low density lipoprotein. That stands for LDL. I'm sure you've heard of it. We'll look into this a little later. Now, if you're following social media, you know that there are heated debates about whether or not high LDL cholesterol matters or small particle LDL, are they more damaging? Each cholesterol camp is adamant that they are right and the other side is wrong. There's even a new group of people called citizen scientists who think that they are special because they are lean mass hyperresponders. They think that their high blood cholesterol doesn't really matter, that they're protected because they have other good metabolic parameters and they're not overweight. They look metabolically fit and they have low triglycerides, low hemoglobin A1C numbers, but they have super high LDL cholesterol levels over 200, sometimes over 500. That occurs because they adopted a carbohydrate-restricted high-fat diet. And recently, they published a 5-year study that looked at the coronary plaque formation in 80 lean mass hyperresponders. They were predominantly white male, and their average cholesterol level was 369, plus or minus 95. Now, the number, according to the American Heart Association, is a super bad LDL cholesterol level, yet the paper found no increase in coronary plaque formation compared to the matched controls who weren't on a low-carb diet. They matched smoking status, hypertension, age, and race. And those factors all would increase the rate at coronary plaque would form. And since they found no difference in plaque formation, they concluded that their carb-restricted diet, because of their unique circumstance being a lean mass hyperresponder, that their LDL level was safe, that they didn't need to worry about it. Well, unfortunately, their study has quite a few fatal flaws. So on the surface, it seems like LDL cholesterol does not directly cause plaque formation, right? Because they didn't have any difference between the control group and the test subjects. But plaque, it takes more than 5 years to form. That's why you don't get to age 5 and pass away. It takes several decades. Heard of the Women's Health Study that enrolled over 20,000 women who were considered to be metabolically healthy with normal blood sugars, low triglycerides, high HDL cholesterol, and high LDL cholesterol, and they follow these women until they pass. After all, that is really why people worry about plaque or even high cholesterol numbers, right? Because people assume the more plaque you have, the higher your LDL cholesterol, the shorter you will live. Notice that within the first 5 years in this graph, that there's really no difference between the different LDL cholesterol groups. The group starts to separate after 5 years, with the gap to early passing becoming even more prominent when you go out to 10 years, 15 years, and 20 years. In the recent paper, there were only 80 people in the study. Heart studies usually enroll thousands of people. I mean, everybody has a heart. There are billions of people on this earth, so you should be able to recruit more than 80. Now, number 3, just because you don't show plaque in the coronary arteries doesn't mean you don't have atherosclerosis. Now, my friend, who happens to be a physician, told me that she recently got a coronary artery calcification score, and it was 0, a perfect score. So she was pretty confident. And by the way, she used to eat like crap, like French fries with salt and pepper every day for lunch. You know what I told her? 60% of people with a coronary artery calcification score of 0 had atherosclerotic plaque in at least one body part, and it's usually not your coronary arteries. And artery calcification scores would be different in different blood vessels. The first arteries to get blocked with plaque are not your heart. They're your femoral arteries that go to your feet and legs. And this is what causes hair and skin changes to your lower extremities. And eventually, if it progresses more, you're going to have muscle pain and cramps. And of course, all of that will affect your gait. Now, the second most common large artery that develops plaque are your carotid arteries. Over here is your carotid arteries. They bring blood to your brain. So before you have heart problems, you'll suffer with gait difficulties and memory issues. Now, number 4, it's been shown in multiple large trials that people below 60 have a lower rate of having coronary artery disease. They're not going to have a positive coronary artery calcification score unless you have a family history of heart attacks at a young age. And these people who inherited these genes, they have a condition called familial hypercholesterolemia, in which they have super high LDL cholesterol levels because their liver is unable to remove the LDL cholesterol from their blood. Now, a 4,000-person trial called Prevention of Early Subclinical Atherosclerosis, they looked at young people with no known atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. The mean age of the study participants, they were 45, and they used super powerful fancy imaging to check out blood vessels all over their body. So if you feel the side of your neck, like right in front of this neck muscle, you'll be able to feel a pulse. That's your carotid artery, the blood vessel that supplies blood to your brain. If you feel your upper thighs near your groin, you'll find the femoral artery. And as medical doctors, we've all had to feel them to place central lines. And when these arteries get blocked, blood flow distal to those arteries suffer. Now, everybody's different. Men have more blockage than women. Maybe our estrogen protects us when we're premenopausal. LDL cholesterol doesn't correlate well with how much plaque your body has. 45% of people with normal LDL cholesterol still had atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. The heart vessels, like I said, doesn't get blocked first. So to tell if you have atherosclerosis, you really need imaging of your femoral arteries. Those are in your groin. And the other problem is that the number for normal cholesterol keeps changing. During the time of that study, LDL cholesterol was defined as 130 milligrams per deciliter. But at that number, 58% of people had atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. Now, 45% of people who had LDL cholesterol of 110 milligrams per deciliter also had atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. And this is why the American Heart Association lowered the normal LDL cholesterol to 100 milligrams per deciliter. But many influencers believe that that number is just too low and that a high LDL cholesterol is healthier, despite several studies showing an association with premature cardiac expiration. Now, unfortunately for them and their followers, I don't think that they appreciate the significance of atherosclerosis. In case you haven't noticed, the vast majority of non-cancerous disease is related to poor blood flow. And this is why as you age, you have more infectious diseases and delayed healing. This is not new. Atherosclerosis dates back to over 4,000 years ago. And at the time, people didn't realize that the association between high lipoprotein levels correlated with advancing atherosclerosis. And this is because science didn't discover lipoproteins until the 20th century. Now, have you ever seen these spots on people's faces, arms, or body? These are called xanthomas, which is a condition in which fats like cholesterol and triglycerides, they build up on the surface of the skin. And oftentimes they will be waxing appearing, kind of yellowish in color. This means that the fats like cholesterol and triglyceride, they're precipitating out of the blood, kind of like how sand falls out of water. If you have this, you have a hallmark of progressive atherosclerosis. Now, since you have blood all over your body, you can potentially have these lesions occur anywhere in the skin, but they are most commonly seen over your joints, especially your hands, your tendons, your buttocks, and your feet. But before you get xanthomas, you'll likely have retinal changes that an ophthalmologist can find. And you'll probably have low back pain and digestion issues and fatigue. The point is, these are all subtle symptoms that happen due to the lack of blood flow. In essence, all of these are signs and symptoms of lipid metabolism problems. And you're either overeating calories or eating the wrong fat. And you're creating this cholesterol imbalance. challenging your liver's ability to dispose of blood cholesterol.
Hi, friends. I am so thrilled that you want to take charge of your health and take charge of your food. Now, I know nutrition can be complex, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm here to support you in this lifelong journey. So if you point your camera app to this QR code, it'll take you to a link for a free handout that I created just for you. And if you like it, if you want to see other handouts, please go to the link in my show notes, and then you can leave me your feedback on what I could do to help you in your journey. Okay, back to the video now.
Now, did you know that 15% of your blood bathes your intestines? And this is why when your gut doesn't feel well, it's hard to do anything. Now, most of the blood in your gut is really there for defense, to keep your gut wall healthy, to ward off gut microbes that are your friend when they digest your food, but they become your enemies when they invade your gut. The wall of your gut is called the mucosa. And when the mucosa is compromised, you have a leaky gut or gut permeability, or simply inflammation. Severe forms of this can result in ulcers and even an abscess or sepsis. There are two main ways to destroy the mucosal wall. Number one, you reduce your blood flow, or you starve your microbes, and they chew on that mucosa for food. Doesn't this give another meaning to thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself? Especially if your neighbor is living within you. This is another reason why it's super important to eat fiber, but not fiber from a bottle. It's fiber-rich foods. When you eat fresh foods, you have a great diversity of fiber, and that will nourish your friends so that it doesn't go and turn around and eat you. Fiber also buffers insulin spikes, especially if you're going to eat carbohydrates full of starches and sugar. Insulin just so happens to increase the expression of LDL receptors on the surfaces of the liver, so it helps to clear your cholesterol in the blood. So when you get a little insulin, even if you do it with super processed foods like Oreo cookies, even while on a ketogenic diet, cholesterol levels will dramatically decrease within days. And this effect is even more powerful than taking statins.
12 Oreos per day lowered my LDL by 273, while high-intensity statin therapy only lowered my LDL by 137 milligrams per deciliter.
Everyone is so shocked that food works better than medicine. And honestly, I'm not sure why, because this has been proven even a century ago that a calorie-restricted, high-carb, low-fat diet improves cholesterol values since the 1930s. Now, this Oreo diet experiment made headlines, but it never addressed the question, is isolated high LDL bad for your health? It just demonstrates what happens when you put some insulin in the picture. Now, previous studies have addressed this high blood LDL issue. And if you wait long enough, it seems even lean mass hyperresponders will have atherosclerosis. And the study would have been so much better if they actually measured plaque in their femoral and carotid arteries and have an ophthalmologist examine their retinal blood vessels. Now, this isn't the first time that food experiments have shown junky carbs can improve bad metabolic parameters, including insulin resistance. And in fact, lots of studies have shown that a high carbohydrate, even white rice diet, and sugar, a highly processed nutrient deficient in lots of proteins and critical vitamins and minerals, but full of starch, can lower your insulin levels. And the effect is so much better than a low carbohydrate or ketogenic diet. So Dr. McDougall was talking about the starch solution, but the rice diet was actually pioneered by Walter Kepner, who limited high carbs to treat obesity, improve blood pressure, and blood sugar. But don't try this diet without supervision, as this is extremely nutrient deficient. It's deficient in essential vitamins and minerals, which may not give you calories, but you'll get sicker faster than from atherosclerosis. Now, if a diet kills birds too, you may not want to eat like that on your own. In reality, any diet that helps you lose weight will help you improve your cholesterol. But will it translate to longevity? Losing weight is the easy part. Keeping it off is much harder. And even no diet can improve blood markers, like this gentleman who fasted for 382 days. He set the world record. But it doesn't mean you live longer just because you're fasting. Unfortunately, he only lived 25 more years, and he passed at the age of 52. Does this sound like fasting is a good thing to do? I do agree that cholesterol is essential. And the problem is that LDL cholesterol is really not the cholesterol that the majority of your cells are using. In fact, your blood cholesterol are used to primarily transport energy molecules like triglycerides to your muscles. So people are confusing the function of low-density lipoprotein cholesterol as a source of cholesterol by itself to organs like your brain. Luckily for you, your brain makes its own cholesterol. In fact, the cholesterol that you have in your blood can't pass through the blood-brain barrier. And I hear influencers say that sick people have lower cholesterol. Yeah, they do, because they're using up more cholesterol from their immune system, and their liver is probably sick. Your liver makes 95% of your blood cholesterol. So when you're sick, you have a rapid turnover of cells, especially your white blood cells, that guard your entire body. So that is the organ that actually would benefit from blood cholesterol when you're under stress, your circulating immune cells. In fact, some people believe that your white blood cell count, along with your low-density lipoprotein cholesterol levels, are a better predictor for cardiovascular risks. Now, it may appear to be potentially beneficial to prevent bad cardiovascular outcome, but what about infectious diseases? And these questions are difficult to study, especially because anybody requiring a statin already has a blood flow problem, which means that they're already at higher risk of infectious complications. Have you ever wondered how fats even get around in your blood? Here lies the problem of physics. Your blood is made out of water, and in it has proteins, fats, and cells. But if you have any chemistry background or cook, you know that water and fat, they don't mix, right? So if you put your bone broth or chicken soup in the refrigerator, the next day you'll see a layer of white fat that floated to the top and solidified. Cholesterol is the type of fat that your blood cannot move efficiently because your blood is made out of water. So it needs a transportation vehicle, and that vehicle is called a protein. Proteins is how your body transports a lot of nutrients and medications. So there are literally thousands of proteins. And the ones assigned to transport cholesterol are called lipoproteins. Now, there are various kinds of lipoproteins. They start from chylomicrons to very low density lipoprotein to intermediate density lipoproteins to low density lipoproteins and high density lipoproteins. Now, this is what a lipoprotein looks like. The outside are proteins, and inside is where the cholesterol rides. And the different lipoprotein names just basically describe different size buses or submarines, and they carry different amounts of cholesterols and other fat passengers in these buses. So when your lab measures your cholesterol, it's actually measuring these lipoprotein levels. But as you can see, you have many different lipoproteins that carry cholesterol. Very low density lipoproteins and intermediate density lipoproteins, the labs can't measure that. And hence your cholesterol is not an accurate reflection of how much actual cholesterol is in your total body, is in your bloodstream. A more accurate way to measure cholesterol is to measure another protein called apolipoprotein B. It turns out that each of these buses have only one apolipoprotein B. So we can actually count how much total cholesterol you have because each of these buses only have one. And this is what makes the greatest difference, how many apolipoprotein B buses you have. So we've been measuring the wrong protein to represent your cholesterol. And so we're debating about whether or not LDL cholesterol by itself is responsible for plaque formation when we should really think about all the transportation vehicles as being responsible for plaque formation. It's like driving in Southern California. Is it really going to be just those little cars that cause traffic, or should you really count all the cars on the freeway? And chances are, if you've ever been stuck on the freeway, you know that all the cars prevent you from getting home. Now, when you have an elevated low-density lipoprotein cholesterol, you most likely will have an elevated apolipoprotein B level because you have all these other transportation vehicles in your blood. And here's where inflammation and your immune system comes in. Cholesterol in your blood vessel wouldn't be a problem if it didn't get oxidized, which occurs when they get embedded in arterial walls. Now remember, blood flows 20 to 40 centimeters per second. The blood in your aorta can actually flow a meter per second. So your neck is really close to your aorta. So if you injected a tracer in your artery in this neck, the carotid artery, it would actually reach your brain in less than 1 second. Now LDL, if you can imagine it kind of floating like a twig in a river. If you've ever watched a moving, running river or stream, you know that debris gets caught at bifurcations, at forks in the road. And the same thing happens in your blood vessels. You have forks, right? It bifurcates to go to different parts of your body. And that's where your LDL proteins will build up and collect. And this allows LDL cholesterol to enter in the walls and become oxidized. Now, your macrophages are hiding in those walls. Their job is to keep your arterial walls clean from foreign invaders. They're like the janitor and the bodyguard at the same time. So they will consume, literally engulf the entire oxidized LDL. The problem is they have no way to empty their trash cans. And so this cholesterol and triglycerides that they engulf, they accumulate in the macrophages, and now they are foamy macrophages. And this triggers a cascade of SOS, inflammation, that ultimately causes them to not survive. But that inflammation attracts calcium. This is why it's dangerous to take calcium supplements. In the process of that injury and inflammation, they secrete molecules that are called osteogenic factors like TNF alpha. These inflammatory molecules, they signal the muscles in your arterial walls, that's why they can contract and relax, to act like bone cells. So while the macrophage is dying off, your arterial smooth muscle cells, they start building their grave of calcium phosphate, which essentially is bone tissue. That's a plaque. This is your body's natural response to injury to build a wall. The problem is that blood vessels can't be as hard as a wall. It needs to be soft as a balloon so it doesn't pop, and blood needs to flow. You need like a clear passage. You don't want like Caltrans to be putting walls up to prevent traffic flow. And when there's enough calcification, that's when you see a plaque and get a positive coronary artery calcification score. Now, by the time they see that, that's old news. That's damaged tissue. In general, that isn't what causes sudden heart attacks. Early plaques, when it's just starting, the calcification story is telling us it's old. But soft plaques don't have calcium yet. They are most likely to break off. They're unstable. Those are more likely to plug up a small coronary vessel and give a heart attack. And hence, when you get a coronary artery calcification score, it doesn't tell you really how much uncalcified plaque you have. The most dangerous plaque is the uncalcified ones, and that elevates your risk of having a sudden event. But I know there's going to be people who tell me that my science is outdated and that cholesterol is super important for the body. It's so important that God has given them that ability that each cell can make its own cholesterol. I mean, imagine if you fasted and your brain depended on your food cholesterol. You would pretty much not be thinking so well, right? And in fact, the cholesterol in your blood never crosses a blood-brain barrier unless you break it, unless you have inflammation, meningitis, encephalitis. So under normal circumstances, your brain makes an ample amount of its own cholesterol, regardless of what your blood levels are. But if you have elevated apolipoprotein B levels, then those vehicles are reducing blood flow to reduce your brain's ability to get nutrients. And if they stick around, they're causing plaques in those arteries, starting from your carotid arteries. And if you're worried about your hormones, the same thing happens to your gonads. They make their own cholesterol. And that's why it's good that your blood cholesterol doesn't determine your testosterone levels. Imagine how we would be feeling if our hormones and our brain fluctuated with our cholesterol levels, right? Nobody would be fasting, because if you fasted, you're not going to be able to make any cholesterol, right? There's actually several sources of cholesterol. And of course, I mentioned each cell has its ability to make its own. But your blood cholesterol levels is dependent upon multiple factors. So number one, your liver makes about 70% of your blood cholesterol, and that is in response to saturated fat. So the more fat you eat, the more cholesterol it will make. If you are overweight, your body will be releasing more saturated fat than a person who is not overweight. Hence, people who are overweight have higher cholesterol levels. Now, your liver just so happens to be the organ that's responsible for removing cholesterol in your blood. And cholesterol generally stays in your bloodstream for about 3 to 5 days. So if you decide to eat better the day before your blood test, it doesn't really help. But having excessive weight, especially abdominal fat, that actually promotes a condition called insulin resistance, which reduces the liver's ability to remove LDL cholesterol. A little bit of insulin is helpful to remove it. Too much insulin is bad. So being overweight and having insulin resistance, often the two go hand in hand, are both independent risk factors for elevating apolipoprotein B levels. Now, I mentioned you can directly absorb cholesterol from your food, but turns out you really can't do much of that. Doesn't really make that much of a difference. But you can recycle cholesterol, which is a big deal. And so today, if you see a cardiologist because of high cholesterol, they are either targeting your liver's ability to make cholesterol or to clear cholesterol, or they can reduce the ability for your intestine to absorb cholesterol or to recycle bile. And many influencers are upset because they don't want to take any drugs that their cardiologists recommend. And I think many cardiologists are very reasonable. If they don't think that you're at high risk of having a catastrophic imminent event, I'm sure they would encourage you to just improve your diet and lose some weight and exercise and see how you do. Unfortunately, people oftentimes, they don't want to do the diet or the exercise and they don't lose any weight. So you end up in the same spot. The other bucket of people, they put weight loss ahead of diet quality. Now this just results in persistently abnormal, unbalanced cholesterol levels. So now you have a basic understanding of what elevates your cholesterol. So you know that if you are eating a high saturated fat diet, your liver will just make more bile and it will add to the pool that's been there for 3 to 5 days. Bile has cholesterol, so it's going to be making more cholesterol to help you digest that food. Now in your diet, you're either going to be eating fat for energy or carbs for energy. And many people eat both. So if you eat a lot of fat, you run the risk of having a lot of apolipoprotein Bs running around. Now, if you eat the right carbs, on the other hand, you can significantly lower your apolipoprotein B levels. Even if you eat starch and sugar, but if you eat that along with fat, then you can actually do the opposite. If you eat the wrong starch, you end up elevating your triglycerides, which can also increase your apolipoprotein B levels. If you want to better understand really how to eat and pick the best carbs, watch the next video.